Hey everyone, welcome to this broadcast of Teams 2.0 and Teams 1.0. I'm going live on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and possibly another platform. This is, because of Instagram, a portrait mode video as opposed to a landscape video, which I'm more familiar with. So I'm playing around with Restream to see how this looks on various platforms. What we have here below me is Teams 1.0 or Teams Classic on the right, and we have Teams 2.0 or the new Teams on the left. You'll notice the difference that the Teams new app version 2 has a white or a off-white title bar, and the Teams Classic or Teams 1.0 has a purple title bar. And this session, I'm logged in as the same exact account. So I'm using my MVP Sandbox account in both tabs or both windows so that we can compare and contrast classic teams to the new teams. Let's start with classic teams, and one of the most common confusions I get from people just starting to use Teams. You introduce Teams and you explain, hey, Teams have channels, and here I have an example of a private channel called Tips, and I want everybody to click on the Files tab. And if you're not new to Teams, you probably know the Files tab is in the Content pane to the right, but inevitably somebody will click on Files on the left in the navigation pane and say, I see a bunch of files, and I see my files and shared and favorites. And if the people clicked where you expected them to on the Files tab at the top of the Tips channel, you would say, no, you should see no files, no folders, but maybe that's where you're taking them to show them how they can create folders or files within a Teams channel. So files on the navigation pane to the far left, and then we also have files at the top of our teams and within the channels of those teams. What Teams 2.0 or new Teams has done is renamed that icon OneDrive. This avoids the confusion when somebody's in a team and they see files, they don't also see files on the far left. And the OneDrive icon and application shows things slightly different than the files icon in the navigation pane. In the navigation pane, we saw home, my files, shared, favorites, downloads. We see many of those same locations here, but we also see recycle bin. And in classic Teams, we had add cloud storage at the bottom with up to 5 choices. And in new Teams or Teams 2.0, we have add new at the top, and it looks like more places is our option to add maybe additional items here. Let's see if we've actually got the same capabilities here. Zoom out a little bit, see if we get any other icons here. Make it full screen. Okay, so that's one difference between Teams, new Teams and classic Teams. Another difference you'll notice is the upper right of the application. We've got the do not disturb because I'm logged in as the same account and I'm set to do not disturb. And we have the immediate information about the test and the community guest tenant that I have access to. Whereas new Teams shows the information about my logon, Separately, the information about do not disturb, a work location setting, status message, and then the other tenant that I have access to. Under the three dots, we've got some of the same type of information here. Let's see if we can make that smaller here. So we have settings, we have the cast capability, we have help in new teams under the three dots menu to the upper right. We have keyboard shortcuts in both. You can see the zoom is at 70% in both windows. And we have the new teams check mark to indicate that I'm using new teams there. We still have the search at the top of both classic teams and new teams, and very similar capabilities there. We can search for messages, files, and more. And we can also use / commands to do things like switch myself from do not disturb to available. You can see there's some different examples within new teams and classic teams. And then if we look at the calendar, we're going to see the calendar views are very similar. Work week, day, and week, getting rid of the weekends. And then in new teams, we have an agenda view as well available to us. So they still haven't added like month or other views, but we can zero in on the work week. We can switch either to a full week, including the weekends, or a day view. But new teams adds that agenda view as well. And then we can pin other icons and applications to the navigation pane. You can see I have some examples of Word pinned to the navigation pane, and then Word opens in a large content pane and allows me to open blank documents or existing Word documents that I've created. Some of the other differences you'll notice between new teams and current teams is when I switch tenants in the current version of Teams, I'll go ahead and provide my security information here. And I'm switched to my new tenant. And I can see that the journey to the cloud is the team that I have listed there. If I can switch here, see if we can switch back here. Journey to the cloud. If I switch in new teams, same type of experience. I can switch to the new team, and I get the team listed, but I'll also get information from the team's chat here. Let's see if I can do a quick message to my Sandbox account. So I've got the same capabilities in the new, but you'll notice in new teams, I've got a little message up here that's indicating that I just got a chat in my home tenant, as opposed to having to switch to then actually see that there's activity that I missed. So this is probably the number one feature that I was looking for, was just the ability to know that somebody had sent me a chat and that I had missed that chat while I was working in another tenant. You'll also notice that Classic Teams has a M365 chat. Pratap asked about, does Teams work with Copilot? So we have that M365 chat in both new Teams on the left and Classic Teams on the right. But you'll notice in new teams, I also have Copilot, and I have 6 chat features that are also what greet you if you're in the Microsoft 365 landing page. So if I make this a little bigger and full screen, we'll see that I can catch up on messages, get calendar info, summarize emails, what's new from a person, help me write or brainstorm as prompts that I am starting with in new teams. So that's another one of the new features that you would notice in new teams versus the classic teams. I can zoom back out here so we can see both the chat history and the Microsoft 365 chat choice that we have highlighted now on the right and the left. Other differences with Teams 2.0 versus new teams. We still have meetings, but you'll notice that a meeting with new teams versus classic teams, my wife just asked me about this today, uses a light background and follows your theme within Microsoft Teams. Meeting there. And we'll look at the same feature in classic Teams, Meet Now. Notice that Meet Now uses the inverse theme in classic Teams. So classic Teams meetings, you get inverted, dark background, light text within a chat. Whereas the chat in the main window would be light with light background with darker text. You'd see that in new teams, and it follows your theme. So the theme would be the same between these two. So just a couple of the differences that I've seen so far between new teams on the left and classic teams on the right. Meeting windows are coded differently, so they look different on your screen. We have the ability to look at our video differently depending on whether we're in portrait, whether we're in the Teams meeting 2.0. We have some new features from a look and feel perspective in the meeting window interface. And we also have apps that plug into those meetings as well. Other things that are within new teams and old teams, and let's see if we can just do another quick share here. Maybe using a different layout. Let's see if we've got a layout where we can get the full Teams view. There we go. So you can see the full app windows. We also have the ability in classic Teams to set up about and get version information and legal information, and you might have some other options here. You have check for updates in the 3 dots. In new teams, we'll see some of those capabilities like keyboard shortcuts. We'll see a link to help, but within help, in new teams, we get a completely separate window. Old teams introduced the same capability fairly recently where it opens a separate window to help. And then the settings dialog boxes look a little different. Classic teams, oops, make classic teams here on one side and get into the settings. You'll notice the settings in classic teams opens in a dialog box, and the settings in new teams opens right within the context of the list pane and the content pane, the three panes that we have vertically in Microsoft Teams. So if I make new teams a little bigger here, we can see general with auto start and various features. We have a notifications and activities area, appearance and accessibility, where we could do things like set chat density to comfy or compact. The theme can be switched from light mode to dark mode. This would be in Teams 2.0, how you get a darker meeting window, because the Meet Now windows or meeting windows follow your theme. So new teams with the dark mode theme would also give you the ability to see your meetings in the same way. So it wasn't get help that I wanted, it was settings in Teams and appearance, where I can change my theme back to light or follow the operating system theme. We have files and links where I can set up the default for what happens when I click on links from the OneDrive app. Teams, desktop app, or browser are my three choices. You can see we have devices and recognition under here as choices. So many of the same features in Teams 2.0 and classic Teams. Just some of those features may show up in like a dialog box versus opening in the list pane and content pane when you go into settings for Microsoft Teams. You may notice other differences. We highlighted earlier today some of the differences between a work and education account and a personal account. Teams 2.0 and classic Teams work with both of those types of accounts. And depending on your operating system, I'm obviously using a Mac today. You may see some other nuances or differences between classic Teams and new Teams. The other thing that I wanted to highlight really quickly was that you can also open classic or new Teams within the browser. So here I have a copy of Chrome, and I've gone to Teams, and I've logged in as a personal account. So you can see there's plenty of different places that I can switch to. If I log off of that personal account in Teams, which was teams.live.com, and I go to teams.microsoft.com in a browser, and I log in as the same MVP Sandbox account that we've been using for our examples. Get logged in here. Using the Chrome browser and Teams for Work or School, you'll notice the new Teams is available from a browser as well. So I can actually switch to the new Teams in Chrome, and the new Teams code loads into the Chrome browser. Microsoft has also announced, so we see Copilot up there like we did in new Teams. Microsoft has also announced that they're going to change the top level domain for Teams to teams.microsoft.com. cloud.microsoft. And I've started experimenting about which applications work maybe a little bit, or have started to use that cloud.microsoft top level domain. One thing that I did notice was that Teams itself seems to at least open and stay at teams.cloud.microsoft, and then it actually has some ring information after that. But not all of the items on the navigation pane necessarily work unless you go to teams.microsoft.com at this point. So OneDrive, for instance, gives me like a little frowny face saying it refused to connect. But some features like the chat and the activity and the Teams views seem pretty good, whether I'm using teams.cloud.microsoft, the new top level domain that Microsoft is introducing for many of the Microsoft 365 applications over time, or whether I use teams.microsoft.com, the current top level domain for Microsoft Teams. So if I switch back to teams.microsoft.com, OneDrive starts working again, and other portions of Teams would function from a browser with the new Teams interface. So that is a bit about new Teams versus classic Teams. We've also looked at some of the plugin capabilities you would get with Microsoft 365 Chat. If you're in the browser version, you can also go back to the Microsoft 365 homepage. And because I'm in the Copilot sandbox, we'll also see that I have Copilot on the left within Microsoft 365, and I have those same 6 messages that we saw in Copilot and New Teams on the Microsoft 365 homepage. Hopefully that's given you a nice whirlwind tour of some of the new capabilities in Microsoft Teams that are coming soon. We'll make sure this hit my Instagram page. I guess I can check that before I go offline here. Open Instagram and see if the connection to Instagram is working from Restream. I know that's a new capability that they just rolled out recently. So I just need to figure out if that is working, and I have to figure out how to switch my tenant here. There we go. We'll switch to my other account. Then we can probably see if I'm live here. I don't see anything in the account here that's talking professional dashboard, videos. I don't necessarily see anything up there. Let's go to the other account. See if we see anything there. I don't. Well, worst case, we're not live on Instagram, but we're kind of preparing for when we can go live on Instagram to make sure the video and the screen sharing is visible from Instagram. So hopefully that has been tested here. Whether or not we're live on Instagram, I'll double check and see if I can troubleshoot that for next time. Have a wonderful Monday, everybody. This has been a little bit about Teams 2.0 on the left and Teams Classic on the right. And some of the differences we've highlighted include the Copilot changes in the 2 versions of Teams, the settings changes, and opening the settings in the list view or list pane and content pane versus a dialog box. And then we looked at the differences in the themes when you go into a meeting. So classic teams, the meeting windows show up in an inverse theme where you get a dark background and light writing. And new teams follows the theme that you choose within the team's application. So if you have the default theme, the meeting window shows up with a light background and darker text. If you're using classic teams, the meeting window shows up with a black background and inverted or lighter text. So you'll see those differences immediately between classic teams and new teams. You might also see some menu differences up in the upper right with where things are laid out for you. And you might also notice some differences under the three dots, like the fact that I have the help menu up under the three dots in new teams and classic teams. The help choices are in the lower left of the application window. So you might see some of those things as you explore your version of Teams. When your company rolls out the new version of Teams is the other thing that they can control. Microsoft has defaulted to the new Teams, but some companies are choosing the dates that they actually introduce that new version of Teams to their employees. So my wife got it last week, and I know that because she asked me about the meeting window. Specifically, she wondered why it looked different. So I hope you have learned a little bit of new Teams today. And with that, I'll let everybody go and have a wonderful evening or rest of your day, depending on where you are.